Welcome everyone to Wine Wednesday. Apologies that we're starting so late. Ward off the children. I need to know first of all if you can hear me. Still having those fun little technical difficulties, so just need somebody to give me a shout out, let me know that I'm heard. And while I'm waiting on that, I'm going to tell you really quickly what I'm drinking on here. Whoop, we don't want to do that, do we? All right, Cheryl, I see you're on here. Nope. Can you guys hear me? Need to know if you guys can hear me. Hello, hello. And just want to make sure. I'm going to assume you can hear me until somebody tells me otherwise. I'm going to really quick check over on YouTube. Chris, apologies for making you wait while I check all this. I just want to make sure. Can you guys hear me? Yay. Okay. I'm going to assume that they can hear me. And we're going to go ahead and start. And if you can't, somebody give me a quick shout out. Sean, could you check YouTube and make sure that I'm heard and he is heard? I need to know we're both heard. Okay, so again, apologies for being so late. Welcome to Wine Wednesday. Tonight I am drinking on 14 hands. Whoops, wait a minute. No, I can't see what I'm doing. We can't have that. Oh, lordy, lordy, folks, lordy. Okay, 14 hands, hot to trot. And Mark asked the other day about what the red blends are. And so, I took that 10 seconds to get on Google and feel really cool to be able to say that a red blend is a blend of like the Merlot and the Cabernet Sauvignon and all of the good red cool wines. It's a blend. So each winery makes their own. Mic closer to me, but you can't hear me? Okay, awesome. And I just need you to watch for a second, Sean. Make sure you can hear Chris because I'm still talking and he hasn't gotten to. Go figure. Okay, all right. So anyhow, red blends are awesome. I really like them. And depending on the winery or depending on where you're, or what brand, it can taste completely different based on how much of each they put in. It's really a cool thing. So, maybe I'll have to find some links for you, but either way, red blends. I like them. Very, very good. Okay. On to the show. All right. So, welcome to Chris. Hey, Sean, we check Facebook also. Make sure we're heard on both, please. Soon I'll be able to do this without all the audio checks, guys, but I just like to be sure. I don't want to talk to myself anymore. And, okay, so, welcome to Chris. Is it pronounced Carey? Is that last name's Carey?
Yeah.
Okay. Chris Carey of Seahorse World is joining us today. And first of all, tell me a little bit about your background and what you were doing before you got started with Seahorse World.
All right. So, professionally speaking, I sort of had nothing to do with the industry itself. I've actually spent the last decade or so working in retail or hospitality. Totally different fields from fish breeding or keeping.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
But in my spare time, personally, what I've been doing outside of work for the last decade or so has been keeping and breeding all sorts of fish. So yeah, I just got into fish keeping, and then I started breeding things, and then the fish keeping bug really bit me, and I just got into keeping and breeding all different sorts of stuff from fish, catfish, cichlids, freshwater shrimp, freshwater crayfish, everything.
When we talked earlier, you said you were like about to do discus, right? Isn't that right?
Yeah, I was setting up to do discus, and then I ended up getting this job. So then I had to pack up everything and move, basically. So I moved state and came down here to live the dream down in Tassie.
Awesome. And just to let you know, I've kept discus. Freshwater fish people do not kill me because I love the discus. Okay, I'm sorry, I was reading a comment. I love the discus, but seahorses and the other things that Chris gets to work with at his job are so awesome, and you're gonna see him in a minute, promise. But okay, um, and you already let me know you did not. Okay, what was your favorite freshwater fish when you were working with the different freshwater species and before you got into the industry?
That's a really, really hard one.
Yeah.
It's always sort of hard to pick a distinct favorite, especially when you're keeping like a lot of different, really super different end of the spectrum sort of fish.
Mhm.
I absolutely loved my Lake Malawi cichlids,
Oh yeah.
but I'm probably not able to pick a favorite species.
Well, I know Sean, my significant other, kept cichlids for quite a while, and he had my favorite was the I'm gonna mispronounce it, but it was like mamba or something like that. The black and white striped ones, so cool. And I don't
Yep.
even think those are not this. Those are like the North American. Anyways, we won't dwell on that. But sorry, I do tend to run off, so feel free to keep me in the conversation. But so what made you decide? I mean, like you weren't really. I mean, I understand you were working with fish, but you weren't really doing like seahorses and stuff. What made you decide to go apply at Seahorse World?
So that's a really good question, and that'll sort of bring you into how I got here and how I got started. So basically, I got the fish keeping bug, and I started setting up more and more tanks. I kept sort of moving house and pretty much setting up a dedicated fish room in each house we moved into. And as we sort of kept moving from house to house to house, accumulating more and more tanks, it kind of reached the peak when we got up to 64 tanks at home.
Oh my gosh.
And so uh, I kind of went off the deep end a little bit, and I was pretty much working full time. I was actually working at KFC at the time, and so I was working, cooking chicken, and then coming home and just looking after fish. So it was like a full time job on top of a full time job. And I've kind of figured that I was looking after that many different tanks, that on my days off, I wouldn't mind looking after other people's tanks. And so I set up a small business looking after other people's aquariums. It was Warrnambool Aquarium Maintenance Services. So
Awesome.
basically, I would go and sort of clean other people's tanks on my days off, or help customers move their aquariums, because not many people are actually set up to move large aquariums. Whereas I'd had a great deal of experience in moving tanks, so I decided that I would go and help other people move it, because I had a have a big red van, and basically I was able to really help people kind of get right into the hobby and go off the deep end a little bit like I was. And I'm a really bad influence when it comes to helping people set up more tanks. I'm sort of the sort of person that will encourage them to set up big racks with multiple tanks and get multiple tank syndrome kicking right in.
I'm sorry.
Um,
I'm absolutely listening to you. I put the link out, and I was going to have people join at the end, and they were joining a little quicker, so I just wanted to hurry up and quickly mute them. I apologize, but I am paying attention and listening. So go on. I apologize.
that's okay. So basically, what it came down to was a little bit. Basically, I had a really bad day at work one day. I had some terrible customers, and I was just in a really bad place with my actual workplace. And basically, I kind of cracked them a little bit and said, I really need to do something else, something that I'm actually passionate about. And basically, I hit the internet really hard, started searching online for, another job. I basically knew that I wanted to do something within the industry. I wanted to, work at an aquarium store, or look at working at a public aquarium, or something with breeding or keeping fish. And basically, I did eventually come across an ad for Seahorse World for the aquarium manager position, and I sort of looked at it and I went, oh, it's in Tasmania, and then I'm like, oh, what's the harm? I'll have a look anyways and see what it entails. And I clicked on the job description and I started reading through all the amazing work that they were doing down at Seahorse World, and I thought, breeding seahorses on a large scale on a seahorse farm, running a public aquarium, running tours through the aquarium and teaching other people and educating people about different species of seahorse and different species of fish. I went, wow, this sounds really, really awesome. This is this sounds amazing. And then I'm like, it's down in Tasmania. And I thought, I don't really have, any degrees or any sort of personal or professional sort of paperwork, academically
Mm-hmm.
to sort of back me up. So I thought I'm not even really going to get a look in. So I'll just apply anyways. What's the harm? Nothing to lose. And so I applied, and I didn't expect to hear anything back. And my boss Craig actually almost skimmed through my resume. Like he just read what I was doing professionally at the start of my resume, and then he sort of skimmed to the bottom, not even reading most of it. And at the very bottom, basically, I sort of focused on what I was doing in my personal life and all the different species of fish that I was keeping and breeding and all that different stuff. And, he started taking a double take at it, and he went back through and read it properly after that. And he's like, wow, this guy is really, really obsessed with fish. He's all about, keeping and breeding all these different types of fish. And he's like, this is really the kind of person that I want, running the aquarium and breeding all of our seahorses. And, I want someone that's passionate about fish. And so that's actually how it all started. And from there, there was obviously a phone call, and because I couldn't actually come down to Tasmania for an interview.
Mm-hmm.
So he did a phone interview, and we sort of hit it right off from there. And uh, yeah, so long story short, I packed up everything and moved down to Tasmania,
I think
and here
that
I am.
that is like the most amazing story to me because it gives someone like me hope because I do my small time breeding and things, but I would love to someday get a position doing something within the industry, and I just don't have that biology degree. I don't have that stuff. Heck, I was in marketing or business. I think my bachelor's was in. I can't even remember. But anyhow, it doesn't help me much with fish or the industry. And so to hear that, you were able to go in and get this job just based on your passion and your love for breeding and taking care of animals is such a good point and such an influence on other people, that might not take that leap of faith and try. So I appreciate you sharing that. So how long have you worked at Seahorse World now since you started?
So I've been at Seahorse World for around 18 months, so about a year and a half.
Okay. Sorry, I got to check my notes here. So, what would you
That's okay.
say? And we're gonna just let anyone watching know. I'm going to check Facebook and YouTube comments after I ask my questions. I'm running this, so I special. I get to ask him first, and then I'll look at you guys's. And if anybody joins, once I'm done asking, you guys can talk away and ask, and we'll have a good old time. But
Who earns?
and I do, and if there's anything important, Craig, I saw you say you were too busy to join. I appreciate you joining anyways. If you see anything that needs to be addressed, let me know immediately, of course. But I do have we're going to practice a little sliding into a video just to let you folks know the slideshow going on in the lower, I don't even know which way it is to you guys, left or right corner, is actually pictures that Chris sent me from Seahorse World showing you guys some of the animals he works with on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to look at a very quick clip in the middle of this, kind of, showing you what he's talking about so you can actually see it. But, sorry, going back to that. What would you say are the biggest challenges that you face in your day-to-day working at Seahorse World? What's the hardest thing about your job?
Um, Probably like just trying to juggle everything. There's a million and one projects going on at any given time, and so it's very hard to sort of juggle with success. Actually, you know, doing everything all at once. It's like juggling a whole bunch of balls, and all it takes is taking your eye off the ball for 1 second to drop one of those balls, and potentially lose something really important. And so it's just basically a giant juggling act.
So do
Um,
you, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Are you
you're right.
is your main Craig, did you need me to say something? I'm sorry.
Sorry, what?
I apologize. I think he said yeah and I misheard. I'm sorry. Okay, so what exactly do you do is I guess the first question I should have asked. What is your position at Sears World? What do you do? on a day-to-day basis?
All right, so I'm the aquarium manager, and basically my role there is to um, basically run the farm, so run the day-to-day operations at Seahorse World, and uh, basically my side of the role is more sort of aquarium driven rather than say customer service based. So uh, we have a whole bunch of tour guides which run people through tours, take people through and teach them all about the aquarium and all about all the farm and the different species that we're looking after and everything, and how the seahorse breeding on a large scale works. But my role is to keep all of the tanks looking great, to collect babies every day and look after all the different systems. Initially, first thing I do every single morning, aside from check on all the livestock, is to actually siphon the tanks, clean up all the poo, all the yucky stuff,
Mm-hmm.
all the fun stuff.
Yeah. So you get to do the
But
dirty jobs. No.
yeah, definitely,
And
definitely.
do you have people underneath? I'm sorry. Do you have people underneath you that not underneath you? That's do you have people that work like under your
Work for
power
you.
that you can tell to go clean the
Yeah,
tanks?
yeah, definitely,
Okay.
definitely. So
I hope
uh,
you use them sometimes. Go ahead.
definitely. So I'm sort of the head of the aquarium team, and
Mm-hmm.
so I have three people that I work alongside
Awesome.
pretty much on a day-to-day basis. So I sort of alternate. I'm generally only working with one of them on any given day, but sometimes, they're all tour guides as well as aquarium staff. So they generally do their thing in the aquarium in the morning and help out, and then they duck in and start running tours for the day. But without those people, everything would basically fall back on me, and it would be a massive workload, and it'd probably be too much, to be honest. So,
Right.
massive shout out to Jesse, James, and Quan.
Thank you for that.
I wouldn't be able to do it without those guys every day.
That's awesome. And yes, thank you for mentioning them. I love that. Okay. I'm sorry, I keep referring to the notes there, but I want to make sure that I try to stay on target this time. The last one was like 3 hours long, so I'm trying not to let that happen to you too, because I know you got stuff to do. Um, so, what species? I want to hear about all the animals, and I do, part of the video part, and I want you to walk us through what people can, what happens on a tour. But first, what species of seahorses have you been successful with in breeding at Seahorse World? Like, which species have
Okay,
you?
cool. So, the potbelly seahorse, or Hippocampus abdominalis, is the main species that we focus on historically. And so, we're breeding those around the clock. They're the main species that we farm, but we do also farm a couple of different other species. So my main focus since I've started has been Hippocampus reedi, or the slender seahorse, or short snout seahorse, whatever you want to call them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's actually been one of my biggest focuses since starting, because when I started, they were actually in a really, really bad position here in Australia. We do actually have the only remaining slender seahorses, or reedi, left in Australia. And so I'm really trying to focus on changing that, trying to breed up enough to actually sell to the Australian market and the international market. But basically, like, the reason why I'm trying to change that is because of Australia's CITES laws. We can't bring more in if we lose what we have, if that makes sense. So once they're gone forever here in Australia. Of course, you guys can still breed them overseas in America or in the UK, or anywhere else around the world. But if we lose what we have, then they're gone forever. So, as someone that's been involved in the hobby for a long time, unfortunately in Australia we've already lost a lot of different fish species over the years because of people not committing to breeding things long term, or accidents or incidents where there's been power outages and they've lost their good breeders or whatever. And so I don't want to see that happen to the slender seahorse or the reedies. But the other species that we're breeding are Hippocampus whitei, so white seahorse. We are doing some other work with a few different other species, but we're not really breeding them in good numbers yet. So we're also working on Hippocampus angustus, or the western spiny seahorse. And we're also hoping to breed subilongatus,
Ooh.
Hippocampus subilongatus. or WA Seahorse.
I know Sam's working on that too. She's trying to get in for the ending here. So just so I understand a little bit better, that was like way down in my questions, but I don't care. I want to know. So when you said that in Australia, if you, I did somewhat understand what you meant. So if something goes wrong, and the breeders that have the pairs of breeding seahorses of a certain species, if something goes wrong and they pass and they're gone, then you're saying that Australia won't let you bring more in from other
Bring more in.
countries. Okay, and that's for public aquariums too. That's just all across
Yeah,
the
that's
board.
just across the board. That
Wow.
yeah, they won't let any more into the country.
Oh
So
my
once they're gone,
gosh.
they're gone.
Well, I mean, I
So the
know
reason the
our
reason why we
rules.
actually have them is, sorry,
No, you
the
go ahead.
reason why we actually have them is because that they were brought into the country before these laws came in,
Okay.
and so I think we've had these ones going since about 2003, just before the laws came in, and so you know we were really lucky that we got them in before these laws came in. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have them.
Yeah,
Um,
because
and
I know.
historically, you guys talk about a lot of different species here on this channel and on the Seahorse groups, and I'm sort of really envious because your erectus and other species, I hear about them and I get to see all these awesome pictures of them, and I'm a little bit envious that we can't keep them. So we can't bring them in and we can't keep them, and so I'm a little bit jealous.
That's crazy. Because like, I mean, that's just not crazy was a bad word. That's awesome. That awesome's a bad word too. That's interesting. It's very interesting because erectus are very readily available here. I can't even imagine. And whereas some of the other species you've mentioned, I'm like, oh, if I could just see one, I'd be thrilled. Um, and so okay, so I got the part. You got them in before the rules changed. Now, what are the rules about if you're allowed to tell me, this wasn't on our list, I'm sorry, but if you're not allowed, it's fine. But what are the rules about exporting? Because I know here a lot of public aquariums, will like basically, in a sense, trade seahorses. Like say you have some of these, I have some of these, or I need some of these. But you're saying Australia can't do that. They can't import, but can they export? Or is it just through you, or how's that work?
So Seahorse World is actually really lucky in that we're one of the few CITES accredited um, aquacultural farms, I guess you'd say. And so we're actually able to trade in species that, technically most people aren't able to under the CITES regulations. And I've heard that we're one of the only CITES, you know, accredited sort of businesses like that. And so it does sort of give us kind of a special exemption that we're able to, export some of these species like barbari um, and Cuda and species like that. So we can actually sell them, but we can't actually sort of bring them in, which is a little bit funny.
Yeah, that is kind of funny. But I mean, I kind of understand. That's really promoting that people take care of what they have, and I mean, heck, as much as I might have different feelings about the laws and the rules, Australia is doing an amazing job of much better than other places of restoring and keeping things going. So hats off for that. And if that's what it takes, I guess whatever. Um, and so now, do you sell? Does Seahorse World sell to? Because I got a little confused looking at the website because I know as far as exporting and large scale, you probably you well the question is, do you only deal with wholesale or public aquariums, or can you sell to people, or can you not
Yeah,
answer that?
definitely. So we do obviously sell wholesale. We sell to all of Australia's big wholesalers, and we sell to wholesalers overseas as well. And they generally buy in really, really good numbers from us. So they buy heaps at a time, um, and that might sort of be off-putting to some of the smaller people. So we do recommend that people use our wholesalers and kind of buy in wholesale from from those people. So that's basically meaning that you can go into your local fish store and
Mm-hmm.
get seahorses special ordered in from the wholesalers. But if you want to go above and beyond, you can actually buy direct from us. The only downside to that will be the freight costs and things
Right.
won't be sort of absorbed by the wholesalers or by the fish stores. They'll, you know, you'll be hit directly with the cost of freighting them to you.
That's really interesting, though. So if I'm understanding correctly, hobbyists in general, should go to their local fish stores, ask, their fish stores to possibly, get whatever species from you if they can't get them somewhere else, and that can work out. And it might cost a little more than average because of export and import and all that. But if someone who was like, wanted a specific species and was willing to fork over the money for it, they could have it shipped to them. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
definitely.
That's interesting for me. Okay, I'm gonna give you a call after this. Look, that's making me shake up the table. No, I'm just kidding. But hobbyists all should, we should all use our local fish stores. Absolutely, is the message. It was just an interesting to me. Okay, so I'm sorry for jumping around. We got into the CITES thing.
You're okay.
So with
Your
your
volume
experience,
guy is incredibly low.
mine is or
You're
his is?
kind of yours, right?
Mine
On
is.
on the stream when I'm listening, I can barely hear you. There's a few people that are having that issue,
I'm sorry,
and your
guys.
volume just dropped in here as well.
Okay.
So
Can I fix it in Hangouts? I'm so sorry.
I probably would fix it in OBS
Okay.
because that's the important one.
Gotcha.
Turn yourself up, your mic, M-I-C-K, M-I-C, M-I-C-K. That's Mick.
It's all the way up.
It's all the way up.
It is all
Okay,
the way up.
we'll work on that later. Maybe just turn
Talk
Chris
louder.
down,
Turn
and
Chris
that way
down.
overall people can just turn up and then they should hear it. But
I
yeah,
just figured
just keep.
why. Can y'all hear me now? Can y'all hear me now? I bet you can hear me really loud now. Sorry, I'm sorry,
I can hear
Chris.
you.
Now see, and
That's okay.
I bet you that's why you kept giving me the look. I got it. I figured it out. But you were probably giving me that look because you're like, I can't hear you, but I don't want to embarrass you. Embarrass me. Tell me when you can't hear me. But okay. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Chris. Sorry, folks. I'm actually I had forgotten, but I'm gonna press record right now, and I think I already was recording it. So for a video outtake of this, I can adjust sound. So sorry about that. And if I'm too loud now, tell me. But the question was, back to the point, the question was, with the experiences you've had now with breeding seahorses at Seahorse World, what would you say, and of course I understand that that's, what? Okay, I understand that that's large-scale aquaculture, not the same at all as hobbyist breeding. But is there anything that you would mention to hobbyists that is a key in breeding that has, that matters as a professional? Did that make sense? Like,
Sorry. Can I just get you to repeat that question one more time? Sorry, I just
sure.
missed a little bit out of the middle there.
I'm sorry. And I'll try to say it more clearly. What I meant was, as a professional breeder at Seahorse World, things are very different from what a hobbyist experiences in breeding. However, is there any key aspect of breeding, like making sure you enrich foods, making sure that you keep the tank clean? It can be basic, but is there any key piece of advice that you feel leads to success that you would give to hobbyists, like saying trying to breed? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. So, any advice I would give a hobbyist looking to keep and breed seahorses with success. So the biggest key thing I would say is give it 100%. So obviously do a lot of your research in that before you get into it, rather than just diving in the deep end. But make sure you're constantly kind of feeding good foods. Start with good foods. Make sure you look after your water quality. So keep the water quality nice and high. Nice clean water, really good foods. Something that I'd probably recommend personally, from my experience both with seahorses and other fish raising them, is feed small amounts but feed frequently. So make sure that the fish as they're growing up, have plenty of food available to them, but make sure that you're not overfeeding, because as soon as you start to feed too much, your water quality is going to go straight down. And so, it's a constant sort of battle to, give them enough food to keep them happy and growing, but without, compromising the water quality to go with it.
Great point. That is an excellent point, and I don't think it's mentioned very often, so I'm glad you made it. Very good point. Is there any species in particular, I do want to know about seahorses, but you can say fish too. Is there any species in particular that you feel are easier to breed? Or, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, for us personally, I would say the potbelly seahorse, Hippocampus abdominalis, is definitely the easiest for us to breed. We're breeding them in such high numbers, and we're doing them on a large scale. So they're what I think is easy. But I hear overseas that other people struggle with them a little bit, which I find funny. But I guess we have the right water temperatures and everything for them down here. So I guess they would be easier for us down here compared to, say, someone in a tropical climate, seeing as these guys are subtropical or temperate, I guess you'd say.
What temperature do you keep the water, or what temperature is the water, approximately?
So we do regulate it. We do regulate it a little bit so that it doesn't reach the extremes of, say, in the middle of winter or in the middle of summer. We kind of try and balance it a bit more in the middle there, but we generally try and keep the water around, sort of 16 to 19 degrees. We generally find with the potbelly seahorses that issues start to crop up and things start to go south a lot quicker if the water is, say, 20 degrees or above. Mm-hmm. And I'd say that basically don't keep them above 21 degrees or you're just asking for trouble.
So if someone did want to keep them and they weren't in Australia or, whatever, they should definitely look into a chiller, which is different from other species, but they need to keep the water cooler than other species. Makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's interesting. I have the same thoughts about, some of our species too. I just have more luck, like sometimes we'll raise the temperatures to get them to breed, but, for fry and for raising them and for bacterial problems, keeping the temperature lower is always the best bet. I'm sure that I have missed some questions, so I'm going to look at my notes while I play the video. So before I play the video, walk me through the Seahorse World Tour. Can you tell me what exactly?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So what we do is a 45-minute guided tour, and basically, you either come through by yourself or with your family or whoever's coming through with you on the day. And basically, we start you off in a room called the cave. And now in the cave, we've got 6 different tanks set up with 5 different species of seahorses. And so you'll get to see a nice little subsection of seahorses that you'll find around the world and around Australia. And so you'll get to see, a bunch of different species of seahorses, and that's sort of our introduction to Seahorse World. And you get to see, how the species sort of differ from one another. And, we just go over the general sort of seahorse anatomy and sort of, just a general sort of introduction to seahorses in the cave. Mm-hmm. And then we will also talk about one of our other tanks, which actually has hybrids in it, and sort of an introduction to hybrids and how they can and do happen in the hobby.
I mean, they got.
And then we move on to.
They got to happen in the wild too. Come on now, but go on. Sorry.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Go on.
So then we move on. Then we move on to the farm, and so the farm concentrates solely on the potbelly seahorse, which aren't in the first room. So it's a whole different species from what you see in the first room. But this is where we scale things right up, and this is where the farm is, and where you see all of the seahorses being farmed on a much larger scale. And so you see the breeders initially, and then we move on to we talk to you about the reproductive process with the seahorses, and how they breed, and then we move on to the nursery where you get to see all of the different babies, and you get to see them develop from, fry that have just been born that morning or just the previous day, all the way through to, fry that are sort of around about 2 months old before they sort of get moved on.
So they can.
And then we move on to our big.
Oh no, I was just.
Sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, so people can literally see a seahorse at every single stage of life. That's so cool. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
You get to walk around our pot system and you get to see, basically, seahorses, say, several days apart. And so you get to walk around and pretty much get to watch them grow up. So you get to see seahorses that are, just born, and then a few days old, a few days old, a few days older, until you get to see them, say, around 2 months old in our pot system. So you basically get to watch them grow up almost.
So cool. And then, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
So after...
Yeah, go ahead.
You're right. So after that, you get to see our Rathbun systems, which are basically our giant grow-out tanks. And there you get to see the seahorses all in a massive big tank. And so you get to see them in a bit of a mixed tank, different sizes all in there. And then basically once they reach a certain size, generally about the size where they start breeding, we move them into the next Rathbun where they'll be at a sort of saleable size. And so I've got 3 different Rathbuns all there set up. And so you probably get to see, I don't know, tens of thousands of seahorses at any given time.
And then at the end, is there not also like other fish that are exclusive to Australia? Was I interrupting? Were you not done?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So we have the Southern Ocean Aquarium after the farm.
Okay.
Also, sorry, while we're in the farm, you do also get to see the different foods that we feed the seahorses at the different age groups, I guess you'd say. So we go into the process of the artemia and how we process and hatch it every day. And we also talk about our mysid shrimp that we feed our seahorses when they grow up. Then we go on to the Southern Ocean Aquarium, and you'll get to see a whole bunch of special fish, which many of them are found in Tasmania. Some of them are exclusively found in Tasmania. You will not find them anywhere else in the world, which is quite special. Obviously we're not a really big aquarium like some of the biggest aquariums around the world. We're a small private business, and so we haven't got the massive budgets and that come with, really big companies, big aquariums all around the world. We're not, state or government funded. So instead of trying to, match the guys with the big budgets, we just try and do our own thing, and we try and, sort of specialize in our own special, like the spotted handfish, which you won't find anywhere else in the world. And we just focus on, things that you won't see anywhere else, basically.
The uniqueness is what is so cool. And I have a couple quick questions before the video. First of all, I want to say, please pass the message to the owner. I don't know if I'm supposed to mention the name or not. Is that okay to mention?
Yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, that's fine.
Rachel and Craig, is it? Is Craig the other name?
Yeah, Craig.
Okay.
Craig and Rochelle.
Rochelle. Yep. I apologize, Rochelle.
Rochelle, that's okay.
I would be willing to pay for a video of that tour because, oh my gosh, or I'm going to have to come to Australia because that is what people want to see and need to see is exactly what you just described. I mean, what size foods, what you do to the foods. Oh my gosh. That's like, I'm coming to Australia is all. That's all. And
yeah, definitely.
Quick question about the separation of the potbellies. Is that for temperature reasons or just because they're your specialty? Like you said, you walk through.
What's that? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Are people still not hearing me, or am I just not being clear? I'm sorry. I said people walk through the cave and they see many different species interacting, but then you have the potbellies in a separate location or in a separate system. Is that for temperature reasons, or is that because they're your specialty and you're just showing them off?
A little bit of both. So the reason why we're doing the potbellies on a much bigger scale and sort of isolated and separate from everything else. So say in the first room you get to see, 5 different species and 6 different tanks. The reason for that is because all of the species that we show you are either subtropical or tropical. And then we move on to the potbellies, and that's all temperature controlled. So obviously we keep it nice and cool in there at any given time, and it's a much different climate in there to, the rooms where we keep all of the, tropical species. And so that's one of the main reasons. But the other reason is just to sort of focus on the sort of aquaculture, the farming aspect of it, and how, you'll see, like I'm guessing there's, other seahorse breeders that are breeding them on a large scale as well, but it's not something that your average person will ever sort of see. And so it's quite interesting how you get to see them being farmed on such a large scale.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's really amazing. And that was my other question. Is it hard? I'm sorry. Is it hard for the breeders? Let me start my question over. You said that when people are on the tour and get to the point where they are seeing the different life stages of the seahorses, and you said they can see the breeders and the breeders are doing their job, is there a separate room in the back where they do more work, or is it literally all on display, and does that, suck?
Yeah, cool. So, the breeders are all on display. It's not like we're kind of hiding anything.
No, you're right.
And you will get to see, all of the breeders in the tanks. We have very specialized tanks for the breeders. Obviously, the potbelly seahorse are one of the largest in the world, and so, we need large tanks for them. So we've got 10 different broodstock tanks, but the way in which we keep them means that we're only using sort of 8 or 9 at any given point, and so we sort of constantly sort of cycle them around, and so that they're constantly being cleaned and sterilized, and then we move them back. So you get to see all the broodstock at any given point, and it's not like we're sort of only sort of showing you so much and you can't see what's behind the curtain.
Oh, and I was not implying that at all. Actually, that was a slip of my slang tongue. When I said breeders...
That's okay.
When I said breeders, I didn't mean the broodstock. I meant you. You are the breeder.
Oh, sorry.
To me. No, that's okay. It was my fault. But I just meant when I'm picturing this, and we're getting ready to watch the little clip, but when I'm picturing this, I'm picturing my house, and I breed on an extremely small scale. And when someone asked me 2 weeks ago if I would do a walkthrough and show my seahorse tanks and my production, I said maybe in a month. I got to clean that up because it's a mess. So I can't imagine you guys either are doing really efficient work and really great work, or doesn't it suck to be on display? Was the point, or is it good?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the challenges about working in a public aquarium is having your work constantly on display and constantly under the microscope. And so, we have potentially hundreds of people walking through on any given day. And so basically you will find me walking through the aquariums. You will find me, working on aquariums. You might even be lucky enough to come through on a tour where you see me in an aquarium, kind of actually physically inside of it, scrubbing away or, cleaning it or whatever. And so I guess that's one of the things. It is a working farm, and so you'll actually get to see, stuff that normal public aquariums probably wouldn't want you seeing. And I try and kind of minimize it because, I personally think seeing me scrubbing away inside of a tank's probably not all that interesting, and so I try and minimize the effects of what I'm doing in the aquarium at any given stage. And so, I try to minimize where people might actually see me cleaning aquariums, but definitely you'll see me kind of either walking through the aquarium or working on aquariums, maybe feeding out on tours. We try and do that so you actually get to see a lot of the creatures being fed on your tours. And so, it's one of those things that I have to constantly juggle, being under the microscope like that and having people seeing what I'm doing. But at the same time, I like to actually stop and talk to our guests where I can about our creatures. And so, if you have any questions, of course, our tour guides are quite knowledgeable and they're able to tell you anything that you want to know. So you get to ask all sorts of questions on the tours. But you can also hopefully have a chance to chat with someone like me, and I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about, anything aquarium related while I'm in there.
And even go so far as to come on my channel and answer questions. You're awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
And I just want to say for the record, I disagree with what you said about maybe it's not that interesting to see you cleaning a tank. I think those things are extremely interesting. No, seriously, because those are the questions you see in these groups is, well, I'm sorry. Or maybe they're not the questions, but they're the questions that people should be asking, because they don't understand.
Yeah, definitely.
They got to clean the walls, So, okay. Well, I'm going to give you a break from my constant questions. I'm going to check my notes. And for the viewers, I'm going to give you a little clip. Hopefully it'll work of Seahorse World. So let's see if I can do that. And we'll be right back. I'll ask a couple more questions. And then Chris will answer your questions. And people can join. Briley, thank you for joining. Thank you for being so patient. You can talk here in just 1 second, and I'll look at the questions from the groups and from Facebook and YouTube and ask them for you. But let's take a look at Seahorse World. Please work. Come on. Yes. No.
So we've got a bit of a feeding frenzy going at the moment. All of our squid are feeding. We're feeding them pilchards and they're loving it. So, trying to pick out the squid that hasn't had any food yet, which is this little fella. And we're going to offer him some. And see how he likes it. And there we go. Look at all those beautiful colours. I think he's a little bit happy with his food. Aren't you, buddy? Yeah?
I played the wrong video, you guys. Hang on.
You see him holding on to it.
That's
And
cool,
all these
though.
other
That looks
squid
like
have
squid.
actually
For cuddle?
Yeah, so those are
Food?
the southern
you can kind of see
calamari.
it through their tentacles.
Southern calamari? Cool.
I'm still here. Hang on. I played the wrong video. I'm worried. There was actually music on this video. And it's gone. So, I'm my best. I'll ask a few more questions.
Got a bit of a feeding frenzy going at the moment. All of our squid are feeding.
Can you hear me now?
We're feeding them pilchards and they're
Chris, can
loving
you hear
it.
me?
So,
Okay.
fun
All right,
to pick
I'll
up
talk
squid
into
that
the
hasn't
microphone.
any food yet, which is this little fella.
All right, hang on. It's transitioning. Okay, welcome back. So I played the wrong video first. I'm learning. And there was supposed to be really cool music, but I'll provide a link, and you can always see these videos at Seahorse World on YouTube. Link will be in the description. Please check them out. They're very cool and really good videos. I was really impressed. So I'm going to ask a few quick last minute questions of Chris, and then I'll let people join as they want and talk, and we'll drink some wine, even though Chris doesn't drink wine. But, okay, so let's see. I saw that Seahorse World was just celebrated 40 years. Is that correct? Or it was 20 years? Was it 20 years? 20 years. That's still amazing. Congratulations. And you never let me know if this question was okay. What was the reason that the company started? Was there a specific goal? I applaud that. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. You're going to kill me. I just realized I did not turn the audio back on. I am so sorry. Chris, can I ask that question one more time and you say that one more time? I apologize.
Yeah, definitely.
The audio is now on.
Definitely.
I'm so sorry. But that's such an important point.
So
the question was,
yeah, definitely.
you guys just celebrated 20 years. Congratulations. That's awesome. And can you tell me why the company started in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. So the reason why we started in the first place was to supply the traditional Chinese medicine market. Now, each year in China and perhaps other Asian countries, seahorses are taken by the millions, and they are basically taken, collected, killed, dried out, and crushed into a powder, and they are used in traditional Chinese medicine. Now, we started up with the aims of sort of supplying that market. So we would, farm the seahorses with, conservation and that in mind, so that it's sort of more it's able to be done again and again and again. And, they're not just taking them from the wild again and again and again, because that's not very
Sustainable.
Sustainable, that's the word I'm looking for. Definitely. So it's very unsustainable. And so we're trying to, sort of limit how much they're doing that and trying to obviously make a business out of it as well. I mean, they're doing it anyways, so why not supply them with, a sustainably grown seahorse product? And yeah, that's basically why we set up initially. Now, historically, that kind of failed very quickly. We actually, set up, we ramped up production, we grew up a heap of seahorses. We culled a heap initially, we dried them out, and we tried to provide for that market. Now, the problem that we come up against was the Chinese are only willing to pay a certain amount for those dried seahorses, and they buy their seahorses by weight. Now, if you can imagine a seahorse dried out and you extract all of the water, seahorses are made up of 90-something% water, or 80-something% water. If you dry them out, they weigh very, very little. They're like, comparing a potato chip to a potato. They weigh next to nothing. And so the price that they were willing to give us for our dried seahorses was not, economically viable. Mm-hmm. And so basically that failed. So basically they weren't willing to provide a price that would, be any way, economically feasible for raising them. The costs with, raising them, breeding them, raising them, and then, processing them and drying them out for them. It's like they were willing to give us, say, 50 cents each for the seahorses, which it's just not, viable to do by the time you, employ people and raise them and whatnot. And so, the business was in a lot of trouble, and, it just was not working. So someone came up with the very bright idea of raising them for the aquarium market. And so, if you can get, say, I don't know, $35, $40 each for the seahorses over 50 cents, it makes a lot more sense to, breed them, raise them, and sell them to people to have in their aquariums.
I, for the record, before I hear anyone else's opinion or even look at a comment, I want to say that I applaud you for trying, because no matter how we feel about certain things, like I love my seahorses and it bothers me to even hear you talk about that. But the thing is, you're trying to save seahorses. What is it? Conservation through cultivation. You're trying to save the seahorses in the wild. And I think it's amazing, and I wish it had worked. And I'm going to go research like crazy and write like crazy about how there could ever be a fix for this, because I do see that as the main problem. There are costs involved with raising and breeding. I completely understood what you said, and I applaud you guys. So, you had to stay in business. Your ethical and very good reason for starting failed. So how did you turn it into something else? How did you go from providing or trying to provide seahorses for traditional Chinese medicine? How did you take it from there to providing to the hobbyists and to wholesalers and doing a tour and being a public aquarium? Was that a hard process or pretty easy? Or
so the tourism aspect of the business actually came about quite naturally. Basically, there was a seahorse farm running, which is Seahorse Australia, in the early days, and basically occasionally they would get a knock on the door for the shed, and they would actually get people, saying, "Oh, can we have a look inside? Can we see a working seahorse farm?" And so they said, "Yeah, sure, come on through." And so this happened once or twice, and then it actually became quite a regular thing. They would be trying to work in the farm, and they would get the knock, 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 and they would have heaps of people asking them all day if they could come in and see what was happening. And so they started charging them. And so, after a while, it got to the point where, it was just constantly interrupting their sort of their work during the day. They would be working for, say, 5-10 minutes, and then they'd have someone knocking on the door, and they would sort of bring them through. And then halfway through bringing them through, they'd have someone else knocking on the door. And so it became a bit of a mess. And so they actually had one day where the owner actually advertised it on the local radio, and as an event, come down and see seahorse is being bred, basically, and see the farm. And the turnout for that was massive. If I know all you guys don't know how big the wharf is, but we had people lined up down and around the wharf and off the end of the wharf back onto the land. And so, the turnout was absolutely huge, more than they could deal with. And so they went, there's definitely an industry here. So that's how Seahorse World was actually set up. So Seahorse World actually primarily sort of their main focus is the tourism aspect of the business. And so Seahorse Australia and Seahorse World are two separate kind of entities. They're both owned by the same people now. And so we're basically almost the same business, but we just have sort of different focuses. So Seahorse World focuses on that tourism aspect. So we set up in a different shed on the same wharf, and that's where we breed the potbelly seahorses, as well as the red eye and whitey eye. But Seahorse Australia now focuses on the barbs or barber eye and the cooter.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so we focus on the tours, and they focus on the just aquaculture.
Gotcha. Okay, people are chomping at the bit to get in here. So my final 2 questions, y'all. The first one's important. The second one's only important to me. First one is, do you feel that even though your vision and reason changed, do you feel that you're still impacting, do you feel that the company still is helping with conservation in general? I know you mentioned that you guys work with scientists, schools, do studies. I just wanted to give you a moment to speak about the fact that, that you're still working with things to promote conservation. So go ahead and tell us about that.
Yeah, definitely. So what we're doing is basically, we're a fully commercial business, right? We're purely kind of in it to, I guess, sort of make money. But the reason why we're doing what we're doing, aside from making money, is to, kind of support conservation and sustainability within the market. So what we're doing is we're providing seahorses for you guys, for people's tanks, and for the aquarium trade and for public aquariums. And we're basically providing you guys with captive bred seahorses, which means in turn you are sort of taking those seahorses from us rather than taking them from the wild. And so you guys, instead of kind of fueling the wild caught market, you guys have us as a resource to, get reasonably priced seahorses for your aquariums or for public aquariums. And so, we're kind of providing them so that they're not taken from the wild, which is beneficial in my opinion. But the other thing is you get happy, healthy seahorses. And, comparing captive bred seahorses to wild caught seahorses is like comparing apples and oranges, They're, readily trained onto prepared foods, and so you can readily look after them, and you don't have to go out and try and catch shrimp to feed them, and, you don't have to raise copepod cultures or things like that. And so, they're much easier to look after, they're much easier to feed. And so, I think that's a big part of it, the sustainability aspect of it. And so the other part of your question, the science works, the other work we're doing, we've done a whole bunch of different studies for different things. So we've done research on how seahorses' eyes work, and that's been used for I guess sort of optometry kind of work, like how seahorses' eyes work, and kind of scientists studying that, because they actually work very similar to our eyes and how they sort of focus, although they're able to move independently a lot better than ours. We can go cross-eyed, and some people have the ability to make their eyes go everywhere, but seahorses are able to focus much better than ours. And so seahorse experts have sort of focused exactly on how their eyes work, and so they've done studies on that. Currently, we're doing a joint program with the CSIRO to work on the conservation of spotted handfish. Spotted handfish are only found down here in Tasmania, and they're only found in a very, very small area of the Derwent Estuary down in Hobart. They're critically endangered. There's only about 1,000 of them left in the wild. And so we're working with the CSIRO to bring these guys back from the brink of extinction. And we've actually had some success so far. So we've managed to breed them in captivity. We've managed to raise a whole heap of the fry. We're still sort of growing them out until they get to a stage where we'll be able to send them off to other places to continue breeding them in the future. But we'll also release some back into the wild, and try and give them a fighting chance because of humans' impact with habitat destruction due to introduced species, exotic species from elsewhere. These things are on the verge of extinction, and so we're trying to help against that.
Awesome and amazing. And I'm going to have you come back on like 2 or 3 more times because all of these topics need more time, and everybody's like dinging me like crazy. Let me in. So,
definitely.
My absolute final question, the most important question of the night, because this is Wine Wednesday, is that there is some local taverns and wineries close to you, correct? I saw literally on the attraction list there are like 2 wineries right near. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. So the Tamar Valley region is well known for its wine. And so it's actually quite famous for its wines. And so we have a heap of different wineries around here. We probably have more than a dozen. I don't actually really drink wine, so I'm probably not the person to talk to about it. But my girlfriend does have some wine, which she'll go and grab soon. Yeah. And so we'll show that in just a tick. But yeah, definitely. So if you come down to this area, there's plenty of wineries to visit, and there's plenty of great wines. Experts that sort of focused exactly on how. I don't know. And I'll just show it up for you guys.
Awesome. Somebody has an echo. Turn off your echo.
Yeah, Riley, you got to turn off your volume.
And that's also, it says Devil's Resolution. Devil's something. My face is in the way, unfortunately. Let's move it to the, which is it, right or left? I don't know. Devil's Corner Resolution. There we go. Nice. Tell your girlfriend to sit
Devil's
down
Corner Resolution.
Tell your
Pinot Noir.
Tell your girlfriend to feel free to come sit down and chat if she wants. If not, it's fine. I'm going to open this up. Everybody feel free to talk. I'm going to check messages and take a little 10-second break. So please don't let the conversation lull, and I'll be right back. That means you, Craig. Peace.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in right quick. I'm just gonna ask a question that KG Tropic had to Chris. Do you guys breed anything besides seahorses right now, like pipefish or cephalopods, anything like that?
Historically, we've bred a whole heap of different. Now, it's not our main focus, but we've had instances in the past where, like last year, I had a whole heap of pale octopus. I had one of our pale octopus breed, and she laid a whole heap of eggs on the inside of a decoration or a pot. And so I was like, this is the sort of hobbyist side of me coming out, but I'm like, this is so awesome. I want to kind of try and raise these and see if we can't get, some babies out of it. And so I was sort of looking after the eggs on a daily basis, kind of kept on kind of trying to check them out and see how they were developing on the inside. And the mother octopus was there looking after them. And I think it was probably like 2 months later, the eggs came full circle and developed, and they started hatching. And so, I was so excited. I was like, and the little baby octopuses hatched out, and they were so cute. And, so I actually took a video of it on, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd day that we had some hatching. And, I had these little baby octopus that I'd collected out, and I had them in a bucket, and I was like talking about how the baby octopus had just been born and whatnot. And I actually, took a video of that, and I posted it on our social media, on our Facebook page for Seahorse World. And that post ended up going quite viral. And, we had local radio stations. We had even a TV crew wanting to do some footage for a documentary. And so, little things like that are kind of little side projects for me, but they're quite interesting things that I think a lot of people sort of resonate with, and they find it really interesting. Always. And, people just love baby animals. So if you get a baby, pipefish, baby octopus, baby squid, baby, anything, people just love it.
Excellent. I got a fella up near me. He does cuttlefish. And,
cool.
And he's had varying degrees of success, right? So But I try to keep people apprised of that. He's working on his next batch. His last batch, unfortunately, was mostly not viable. He had
Yep.
2 out of 32 that came out, and it just, for whatever reason, it didn't go this time for him. But last time he did pretty well up until an equipment failure. So we got some people that are in here. I know people have had questions, and I know Briley's been here almost as long as I have. So I'm going to let Briley speak. And Briley, just watch out that your YouTube, if you're on your laptop, that your volume is turned down or you have a headset on, because you're looping through. That's why I muted you. So just so you know you're muted, you're the only person that can turn that off. You have to do it in Hangouts. Yeah, you guys will hear it. Sorry about the big sniffing man cold stuff I got going on here. So I say man cold, but my doctor's freaking out because I've had it for 2 weeks now. He's like, "Oh, I'm diabetic." Just people that know. So, well, she's not
Cool.
jumping in right away. So let's go with. I know Dan is just aching to ask a question.
How you doing, Chris?
Good, thanks, Dan. How about yourself?
Good. Congratulations on your position. It's an envious position for many. A couple questions I had was about your fry systems. You've probably seen from my stuff, I use a lot of round tanks, and I'm assuming that you guys do the same. And I'm wondering if you guys do deploy the Kreisel method at all for pelagic fry.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Thanks for asking. Also great to chat with you as well. So we do have a lot of round pot systems. They're the ones that we primarily use for our pot bellies. We do have some other species like Reedi and Angustus that have pelagic fry. And, historically, they're the hardest for us to raise because of the issues that you have with them. I've actually had some mixed success raising them, but I haven't been raising them in Kreisel systems. I've been raising them just in square tanks. But I haven't had as much success as I would like. So it is something that I want to have a play with and sort of explore more and see if I have more success in a Kreisel system.
Sure. Are you guys using pods with them to start off with?
No, so that's a really good question. Also, I really, really want to get into using pods, but historically we've had some issues with them. We've had some parasitic copepod species that have, basically attacked and caused a lot of mortalities in our seahorse fry. And so right now we currently don't use any at all. We just use, Artemia and rotifers. And so, yeah, I would like to get back into using copepods, and it's one of those million projects that I've got on the go. I'm hoping to
Sure.
set up and
do you guys,
get into that.
Do you guys try to collect plankton at all?
No, we don't. So
Okay. I found my best success with using plankton. Using rotifers, for example, the Teneropterus or the Cuda that you guys have, our best success with those was about 50% using rotifers and going to Artemia. But when we went to plankton, all of a sudden it just shot up to crazy, stupid numbers with success. We ran out of space because we had too much success, if you will.
That's a great problem to have.
Well, it is, but it kind of screws up your breeding program because you're on hold until you get rid of everything. The white eye that you guys have, and I think Project Seahorse classifies the Proceras as the same thing. Do you guys do the Proceras as well?
No, we don't.
Do you know if you guys have any plans or availability at doing the Breviceps?
So we do actually have Breviceps. We haven't been breeding them since I've been here, but it is one of those projects that I really want to get going again. The reason why we don't breed them at the moment is because I've only got 2 and they're both females. But I am trying to hunt down some Breviceps down here and get a breeding program going, because I think, dwarf seahorses definitely have their place in the hobby. And so I'd really love to get the breviceps going again and have them available for the aquarium trade, both in public aquariums and for hobbyists.
And the thing is,
Yeah.
you can't bring them in, right? And also, Dan, I just have to throw out this question because you guys are talking, and someone on the outside that's not to you guys' level, when you're talking about collecting pods and plankton and such, next week Sam will be on to talk about some of the things that she does. But my question to you is, you sterilize and filter them a lot, right? I mean, because what he was saying is he had problems with collection having problems. So is that even a good idea if there's problems? Did that make sense?
If I'm understanding correctly, Chris, you guys were finding parasitic copepods within your copepod cultures, correct?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, a little bit different. They're using cultures where I'm actually collecting plankton.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I get it now.
So-
that was my confusion. Okay, well,
So-
anybody else who is confused, now you'll get it too. Okay, go ahead.
The breviceps are a big request up this way. Everybody asks for them. I do the abdominalis as well here, and in fact, I try as hard as I can to keep the brakes on them, but they still populate faster than I can sell them. And I find them to be the easiest species of all the species to breed. And it's too bad you cannot get the erectus down there, because you guys would have great success with those, and they would be a very desirable species down there.
Yeah, definitely.
A couple of the other questions I had, and if any of these questions are off that you don't want to answer or should not answer, you can say so. Looking at pictures, it looks like you guys are right on the water.
Yeah, so we're literally on a wharf, and so it's probably like 50 meters off the shore, and so we're
Okay.
right there on the water.
Are you guys able to use natural seawater that way?
Yeah, so we actually pump our seawater in, and so like in one of Kelly's questions earlier, I did actually talk about good water quality being one of the fundamental things that you need. And so we actually pump our water in. It goes through a sand filter, goes through a special machine known as Memtech, and I probably attribute that our supply of clean, purified water as being one of the biggest reasons for our success. So it goes through all these different stages of filtration and goes through UV and everything like that. But basically what it means is that as our plant and equipment sort of stage level things go, we have basically clean, purified salt water on tap. So I can get, big hoses and whatnot and just do massive water changes where everyone at sort of a hobbyist kind of level almost dreads doing water changes. Whereas for me, water changes are the solution to, almost every problem. If there's too much waste, whatever, just do a big water change and that fixes that.
Well,
And so we do daily water changes.
What about alkaline water, or wastewater, I should say?
So wastewater is in like the seawater that we're getting rid of.
Yes.
Yeah, so it goes through UV filter before it goes back down into the tamer.
A little envious. I have to haul the water in.
I was gonna say I'm sorry, Dan, but I was gonna say I'm extremely envious too. I can't imagine you've got the complete setup and the filtration. That is amazing. Sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
No, I'm envious because I have to, in order to use seawater, I have to go collect it. I have to go out at high tide and get as close as I can to the sea and pump it, filter it, sterilize it, go through the whole mess. And, I end up doing that several times a week. And I'd be real envious of not having to make those trips so many times. That's really all the questions that I had. I did notice that on the pot bellies that at the temperatures that you recommend, we keep them at 19. And we notice ourselves that when you get above I go by Fahrenheit, but I'm guessing it's going to be around 21 or so. There's problems. And one of the issues that I often see is I have people ask me all the time, well, why can't you breed them to live in higher temperatures? And they don't seem to understand that you can't do evolution in a matter of a few breeding cycles. And people think they can keep them at around, I guess, what would be close to 21, 22 Celsius. And from what I've seen, they don't last long.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a really good point. You can't undo sort of millions of years of sort of evolution in the blink of an eye to sort of raise them in warmer temperatures. I guess after many years of breeding, say a couple of decades, maybe you might get to that point. But I don't even think it's them being tolerant of the temperatures. I think it's more just things as the temperature starts to move up start to happen a lot quicker. The sort of metabolic rate of parasites or bacteria starts to grow exponentially once you start getting even just a few degrees up. And so I think things start going south a lot quicker once those temperatures start to come up.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for being on tonight, and I've enjoyed it and I've appreciated it, and I'll let other people jump in here and ask their questions.
Thank you, Dan,
Not a problem.
coming.
Thanks for having the chat, Dan.
Sorry. I'll get better at this. Hey, who else is in here and what other questions do we have? I'm sorry that yeah. How you doing, Briley? I don't think I can hear Briley. Let me see if that's my fault. Let me see if that's my fault. Okay.
I think she's muted on her mic at one end and her
Can you?
at the other.
Wait a minute. Here we go. Wait, I have her all the way down. Briley, say hi. Nope, still can't hear you. Hang on. Okay, well, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on. It's on your audio. Sorry, guys.
It's on her end. It's on her
so
end.
Sorry.
Briley, we can see you.
But we love having you on, if that counts. And if you figure out your mic, talk. And I'm not sure who
Because I see her
picture is.
twice, actually. There's Lee, and then Briley.
Craig, I was trying to check for questions. Were there any from the comments?
I'm having a look here. Most people are just worried about me being sick. Thank you for all the well wishes.
I
I'll
know,
make them,
and I'm worried too. I feel bad that you jumped in. Thank you.
No, I had to get up. You can only lay in bed with the man flu for so long before you say no. I got to get up here. This is my wife's making me look bad.
Sam, I did send the email. It took me a minute, sorry, but if you get it quickly, because we probably won't go much longer. I know I've taken up a bunch of Chris's time, but
Don't stress about me. I'm happy to be on.
yes, well, it's so cool too, and I apologize again for everybody for being late. We just had some issues with getting everybody situated. But so, what do you like the most about working aside from? Actually, I'll just ask. What do you like the most about working at Seahorse World? What's your favorite thing?
That's a really good question. My favorite aspect of it is probably just the, I guess, sort of, I work in a very beautiful place. So Seahorse World is situated in Beauty Point in Tasmania, which is on the Tamar River. And every single morning I come to work, whether it's a grey, miserable, rainy day or whether it's clear sky or whatever, I usually come at the crack of dawn. And most mornings I actually get to see the sun come up, which is beautiful. But I come to work in a beautiful place. I'm working with beautiful, majestic creatures. And every day is a new challenge. Every day is, a new kind of experience. And like Dan has said in previous live streams, you're constantly learning every single day. Now, I've only been at Seahorse World what feels like the blink of an eye, only 18 months. But every day is a new learning experience. And so, just to be surrounded by, the churches that we are, it's just an awesome experience every single day. And, I've sort of been thrown in the deep end, I feel a little bit. I didn't know very much at all about seahorses when I very first started. And so, especially with things like the reed-eye in the situation that they were when I started, I had to basically get thrown in the deep end and figure out how to bring them back before we lost them. And they're doing much, much better now. We're actually raising a decent number now, which is really reassuring that we're not going to lose the species. But just having, challenges to work towards like that, and actively feeling like I'm making a difference in the hobby and making a small little difference in the world doing what I'm doing, whereas none of my previous jobs I really felt like I was, actually making a difference. I could say, I made the company a little bit of money this year, add profit to 10% up, 15% up, 20% up, whatever. But that doesn't make you as an employee feel very good about, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Whereas if you're overcoming challenges and you can actually see the real difference that you make, if you can see that a seahorse species which hasn't been available on the market for a few years is now available, and that's the difference that you've made, that actually is a really awesome feeling, to feel like you're actually making a difference, and not many jobs can provide that sort of experience.
I'm so
So
jealous.
I feel extremely lucky.
Yes, I'm so jealous because what you just said is very well put. I mean, having a career, a position, having meaningful, I can't even think of the right word, but having that passion in your position, in your job, that you're making that difference is just, yeah. I wish I had it. So I'm really jealous, but I'm so glad, those reed-eye are doing better because you might have been thrown into it, but you figured it out and you kept trying until you got it right. And now you're getting it right, and that's so great. So I'm thankful. I know that. I heard
Yeah, definitely.
I heard someone else say something. If you guys want to ask a question, just interrupt. Feel free.
Can you hear me at all now?
Now we can hear her.
Ah, yay.
It's low, but try turning her up a little bit there,
Okay.
Kelly.
Yeah.
In Hangouts, it's probably because the way she set up. That's great. Sounds like an Australian accent.
Yes, and she's all the way up, so I can't do much more. But
All right. So wherever your mic
Riley,
is.
I'm so glad to talk to you. I'll lower mine.
Me too.
No, you're good. You leave yourself where you are. Go ahead, Briley.
I don't really have many questions because I got to actually meet Chris down at Seahorse World, which is just amazing.
You did, and it was great meeting you as well.
Yes, it was. I was totally blown away by the mass production of all the seahorses and the little handfish. They're incredible.
And I know Tina is. I'm doing this on purpose. I love putting Tina on the spot. By the way, for you folks that don't know, I run my own channel called Live with Reefer Madness.
Very good channel. Check out Live with Reefer Madness. Radio.
When I'm there and I'm, man, sick.
Did you
Do
see? Look into my eye.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Lord. We're not doing the eye one on this one.
Yeah.
Okay, guys? No eyes.
I can do it. You can get me whenever she wants, but I know she's starting up a seahorse tank. So
I am. We are halfway ready there.
Hey, speaking of which, Tina.
Oh! I got it. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Tech Guy. Sorry if anybody else heard that craziness in the ear. Somebody, I don't know what happened, but Craig fixed it. Good job. And Tina, I wanted to ask, are you on Facebook? Did we get this settled last week? Are you part of Seahorse Sources group and Seahorse Keeping
Yes,
Bay Fun?
I am.
Okay.
I am now, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's, my group and Dan's group, and they're good groups. There's also Seahorses and Pipefish. Good places to, isn't there a Seahorse Australia? Chris, is there a Seahorses Australia group? Do you know?
Yes, so Seahorse, there is one for Australia. I can't remember the name of it.
Well, I know I advertised in it, so I apologize.
That's really bad.
Yeah, me too. I actually apologize to, I think it's called Seahorses Australia. If Sam were able to get in, I did send the link, then she would be mentioning it. And I just wanted to basically give a shout out to all of the people working really hard to provide good information in these groups. And I'm sorry that I don't have your name right. So, but I think it's Seahorses Australia. You know, search will find it. So anybody in Australia who, you know, wants to know more, obviously Chris is here for questions now, and he's, you know, on these groups, and so, you know, join them, because there's people in there working really hard to help new seahorse keepers in all ways. And I, for one, am extremely thankful for places like Chris, like Seahorse World, that are helping us protect seahorses in the wild and breeding new species and trying to keep Australia going with seahorses. I had no idea that you guys could not bring new in. That's wow. That's, I don't even know what to say about it.
Chris, is there anybody else in Australia commercially breeding now that the other two places closed down?
No, so we were the very first seahorse farm to set up, and historically I think there's been 3 others over the years, but we are currently still the only one running. The others have opened up and closed down since, and before my time. So we are the only seahorse, farm in Australia, and so I think that places a bit more pressure on us, because, you know, it means that we sort of almost dictate the market a little bit, which is a little bit interesting. But, you know, it means that if, you know, we want to start producing another seahorse species for the aquarium trade or for the market, that we, are the ones responsible for that. So we can't just sort of rely on someone else to start producing, say, breviceps or whatever. So that's kind of all on us at the moment. So we really need to kind of step up our game and make that happen.
Do they allow you to collect breeders?
That's what I was getting ready to ask. Great question.
Great question. So I do actually have a permit to collect some. I'm finding it very, very difficult to get reliable information on where to find them. I do know where there are some in another state, but the exact location of where they are, which I do know, is a place that we can't actually collect from, because it's a little sanctuary that's protected. And so I need to find a place where I can find them and collect them legally, and, you know, track them down. And the problem is, if you, like many of you guys who actually had the luck of being able to go diving and actually find seahorses in the wild, would probably know and relate to this really well. Seahorses, especially when they're smaller species, the smaller they are, the harder they are to find. They blend in incredibly well in their environment. And so if you're going around swimming looking for a little seahorse, it's like this big, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yep. Yeah, for the dwarf seahorses, they don't even dive for them. They use nets and trawls.
It's interesting to me that, you know, obviously these regulations and rules are in place, and the marine protected areas are extremely important. You know, they're making a big difference in certain countries. But when it's prohibiting, like I guess as a hobbyist, as someone who doesn't understand all the rules, I'm just not understanding why someone with a permit is not even allowed to collect from a marine protected area. Does that, like, why is it just, I mean, like, nobody gets to go in there, but you can't progress in the farming if you can't get the brood stock. So it just confuses me. I know you don't have an answer. I'm just rambling.
No, it's actually a really good point. And, you know, it's one of those things that I do have the permit, but my permit is specifically only for Tasmania. And so my problem is I don't know where the breviceps are in Tasmania. I know where they are in Victoria, but I don't have a permit for Victoria, if that makes sense.
I do.
So as soon as I cross over those state lines, which in our case is the Bass Strait, and they might even be like, you know, 20 or 50 years down the track, they might even recognize them as a different species because they're from a different location, you know, quite quite far away. But getting the permit in a different state that you're not in is very difficult, and it's actually quite costly. If Seahorse World wanted to fund a trip for me to go over and collect some in Victoria, because we're just a small, private commercial business. It would be a big leap of faith for them to, fund a little expedition for me to go over to Victoria with the intent to collect some. And it's a bit of a kind of a lot of paperwork involved in getting permits and everything to make that happen.
Yeah, I bet you personally probably don't want. I mean, it would be an experience of a lifetime, but if you did come back empty-handed, that would really suck. And I think
Definitely.
I think I did misunderstand. So just to correct myself, and so that I understand better, it's not about protected areas. It's just about the way Australia works is the license. Well, the way everywhere works, the license is per the area. So you can't go out of your area. I get it now. I'm sorry that I misunderstood. So, but.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm not sure, based on Victoria's laws, whether I'd be able to get the permit to actually go into those areas. They could actually just say you can have the permit to collect the breviceps, but you can't have the permit to go into these protected areas because they're protected regardless. They can basically impose whatever condition they want, and so. We have had situations in the past where we've wanted to collect a certain species from a certain area, and you still get told no. Just because we apply for it doesn't mean we actually get the permission. But yeah, we try and do everything in a sustainable way, and that's kind of all we want, just to be able to collect broodstock to keep perpetuating these different species of seahorses. And right now in Australia, basically all cygnathids, all pipefish, all sea dragons, and all seahorses are all very heavily protected. Currently, Western Australia, or WA, is the only, I'll say it's the easiest state to be able to collect from. They're a bit more sort of lenient with their collection permits, and so you do have a lot of collectors collecting from the wild over there. And they're probably the easiest state in Australia to collect from at the moment.
So I'm sorry, I was following, but normal people can collect from the wild in certain areas. Is that what you said?
Only if you have the right collection permits.
Okay, so everyone in Australia has to have a permit, and the people that are doing this
Yep.
sustainably are doing good things. They're trying to reproduce for other reasons, for hobby. We just need to get traditional Chinese medicine on board, to pay what they're worth, or whatnot, and it would actually have worked, because that was a great plan. But we're gonna have Sam on next week, and she's gonna discuss. Hopefully, Briley will come back and we'll get the audio working. We'll practice through the week, and we're gonna have Briley and Sam talk about being a hobbyist in Australia. And then just a preview for anybody viewing, the week after that, I'm going to have a hobbyist breeder talk about breeding on the hobbyist level. So you'll see ads for it, but I just wanted to mention it. And back to questions, if anybody had any. But I think you're doing a great job. The more that I looked into Seahorse World, the more I was impressed. And as much as you are very you don't give yourself much kudos, you say you were thrown into it, you are doing an amazing job. So I personally thank you for everything you're doing, and continue, please. But Dan, did you have any more questions? No problem. Dan, did you have any more questions, or?
No, not really. I understand what he's going through with the permitting process. In Florida, there's different types of permits, and there's also what's called no-take areas. And it doesn't matter what kind of permit you have, the no-take area is a no-take. In Florida, you have a recreational permit, then you have a collector's permit, and then there's the scientific permit, which gives a tremendous amount of leeway for doing research. But even with a scientific permit, they can't go in the no-take zones. They're
protected.
Those are just protected areas, and I understand that, and I get that, and you know, it's how it is. I mean, um, we had a local area it was interesting that in this particular local area, there was a lot of seahorses, and people found out about it, and it was a famous dive spot. And once people found out there were seahorses there, all of a sudden everybody was trying to dive and collect all the seahorses, and they had to make it a no-take zone because it was, you know, it was more of a tourist area where people could go in and look at things and see things,
Yeah, of course.
and instead of people going in and just wiping it out, you know.
Well,
Definitely.
I have a question to both of you though, because as Dan just pointed out, there's a reason for these protected areas because, you know, people suck in general. We don't in here, but some people suck. But my question is, I'm researching to write an article, and I was reading an article about the fact that these marine protected areas have all these issues too. For instance, predators. You know, you can protect the area from humans, but then when, you know, fish aren't as stupid as people think, and when the predators figure out that the seahorses are hanging in this area, that's where they're going to go to eat. And there's just all these reasons why they have problems too. So my question is to both of you guys or anyone, do you think that the protected areas are making a difference in conservation?
Well, I
Chris, I'll
might
let you
take
answer
this
first.
one for Australia. I think that Australia, in many ways, is kind of leading the charge with protected sanctuaries and whatnot. I know from growing up in Australia, I know of quite a few marine sanctuaries and no-take zones, things of that sort of nature. But I think it's very important that Australia does sort of lead the charge in that sort of respect, because I'm not quite sure of the exact statistic off the top of my head, but I know that we have almost half of the species of seahorses found in the world just in Australia.
Right.
And they're very endemic and not found anywhere else in the world. And, you know, that doesn't just apply to seahorses. You know, all of the sea dragons are just found here in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it's a massive biodiversity hotspot. And so it's very sort of crucial and critical that we do protect a lot of those areas, so that, you know, so that we have seahorses, and not just seahorses, sea dragons and cygnathids in general, just, you know, fish and wildlife for the future. I think it's highly critical that we don't just think of, you know, today or, you know, 1 year from now or 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I think it's important that we have, you know, these areas untouched and protected for the generations to come.
And I agree, and I see your point completely. I want to give Dan a chance to respond. It's just interesting to hear the different sides of things, because I do agree with everything you just said, and it is very important to think of the future. But in a sense, you are also thinking of the future. So not allowing you to collect broodstock, which would promote more captive bred specimens in the hobby, maybe someday traditional Chinese medicine, you know what I mean? So I just wonder if maybe the protect areas aren't a great thing, but maybe they should allow certain people certain things. But I could be wrong. Dan, go ahead.
Well, you have to remember that most rules and laws are made for the masses, not for the individuals. And each rule and law has sometimes some unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's ways to go around those things. But I can tell you from experience in living in Florida as a child, you know, where we used to go and hang out to work on the boat. There was nobody there. You know, today on a Memorial Day weekend, there might be 3,000 boats anchored in that spot, and the population of Florida has expanded so much, and there's just so many people that you have to protect some things. And I don't always agree with how they go about making the determination, but there is some logic and some reason behind it. You know, the big sore spot for most boaters in Florida is the manatees. You know, they have all these quote unquote manatee zones where boats are supposed to go at an idle, but they've got these signs up that, you know, from this point to this point, you have to idle. And I'm just not sure that the manatees know what the signs say and where to hang out. But they've got these signs up that you know. But as far as the no take zones, it makes sense to me in some of these spots where they've done it. Areas where we used to fish, now they're no take zones. They're now a tourist spot for people to dive and look and see, but don't touch anything. If they allowed people to take, there'd be nothing left. There's just too many people going in to do things.
You're right. I don't disagree, and that's correct. I want to see more. I want to see more seahorses in the captive breeding thing, but it is way more important to keep the seahorses in the wild protected. So I do agree with both of you. Thank you for making your points, because they're both very, very good. Chris, I had one other question that I forgot to ask during the interview. We did talk a little bit about it, but are there any other species that you wanted to mention? Like, what are, aside from seahorses and sea dragons, what other species of fish are specific to Australia that only you can collect? What else is in Seahorse World that we can't see anywhere else? I know you mentioned a few, but I'll repeat the question in a better way. I'm sorry. What I was asking is, what are your favorite species and fish that you can only find in Australia that you get to see that we don't get to see often? What are some of those?
That's a really, really tough question.
I know, I'm sorry.
Probably, I'll
He's really good with the tough questions, Chris. I'm
I
not kidding.
am.
personally, like, it's going to sound really, really weird, but from where I was in the hobby before I actually got into this, something that I was getting right into right before I came to Seahorse World was shrimp, freshwater shrimp, all different kinds of shrimp. I'm a bit of a shrimp nerd, and so I have this like mini obsession happening with different types of shrimp, crayfish, and crustaceans and invertebrates. And so, I absolutely love all different kinds of shrimp, whether they're freshwater, saltwater, all different kinds of, crayfish, lobsters, whatever. And so, things like even just simple mysid shrimp and whatever, they're really interesting to me. We do actually have a very special display at Seahorse World, which is a giant freshwater crayfish. And they are the largest freshwater crustacean or invertebrate in the world. And they're only found exclusively down here in Tasmania. And if you look on a map, Tasmania is a very, very small in comparison to the rest of Australia. And these giant freshwater crayfish are only found in about 14% of Tasmania. So they're only found in this tiny, tiny little zone up in northern Tasmania in waterways that flow into the Bass Strait. And so I would probably say that they're my personal favourite. We have only one giant freshwater crayfish. Her name is Asta. And, one of the big roles of my job is actually looking after her. And I have more paperwork associated with that one creature than any others. So I kind of almost have to pay more attention to our giant freshwater crayfish because, if something goes wrong and we lose her, then I have to do an incredible, stupid amount of paperwork to go and collect another one. And so, she's been with us only a smidge longer than I've been there. And so I've made it one of my big duties to make sure that we keep her long term. And I would absolutely love one day to instigate a breeding program at Seahorse World for the giant freshwater crayfish.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Can anyone hear me now?
Is that Briley?
What's that? Sorry, Briley?
Oh, you can hear me. Yay,
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought you were Sam for a minute. I'm sorry. Hi again, Riley.
I'm struggling to get on.
I know, and you, Sam, and I can do some practicing through the week. Chris and I actually did do a practice yesterday, and it still didn't help. We still had trouble tonight, so it's just kind of the way it goes. But anyhow, glad to have you. Glad you're in.
Thank you.
Anybody else got anything?
Oh, so who was it that got in? We got Briley back. I did send a link off to Samantha
So did I.
and Jimmy should be here in a minute. So
Okay.
he was in.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yo, do it.
Cool. So I know like I'm the guest or whatever on here, but I would actually love to ask a question of Dan and Kelly and anyone in the US or basically anyone outside of Australia. I would love to know what species you guys have readily available to you that are from Australia, because one of the things that I would really love is to increase that amount, so increase the amount of species that you guys have over there. And I feel like that's one of the important things that I can do for the hobby from my position, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You want me to go ahead and answer it?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Dan. I'm sorry. I am listening, but knew I couldn't answer
Sure.
that one. So, go ahead.
Sure. Chris, I deal with a couple of wholesalers that buy from you guys. The potbellies obviously are available. The Barbary, the Tanneropterus or Cuda, and that's pretty much what we see coming from you guys. If you guys were breeding the Reedi and had them in numbers that you could export them, those would be very easy to market, not just in the U.S., but elsewhere where you guys ship. What I find interesting is for the amount of abdominalis that you guys breed, we don't see that many in the United States. What we see the most of is the Cuda, and to a lesser extent, the Barbary here in the U.S. And that's, every now and then somebody will get one of the other species that you mentioned, and it almost seems like somebody special ordered them. It's not like they're coming in to the wholesalers. The white eye, the Angustus, etc. Those you don't normally see in the United States, except in public aquariums.
Yeah. So, like, I'll agree with that. And I know historically we haven't sold many red-eye and white-eye. And I'm honestly probably focusing 50% on the pot bellies at work, because that's just part of my daily role. I have to sort of focus on them. But I am trying to kind of pull myself away from them a little, focus more on the red-eye and the white-eye, because they're two species that I think are important. Sorry.
Right. The U.S. market is primarily tropical species orientated. It's very difficult to move many cold water species. People just aren't willing to spend the chillers and set up the tanks for that. They're just not used to it. So as a consequence, I suspect, from the if I mention the names, you'd know them, but the wholesalers that I know are interested primarily in the tropical species.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Dan, with my thinking, if people are willing to get chillers and stuff for their axolotls and stuff like that are in the freshwater hobby, why wouldn't they be willing to? I mean, if I were to, that'd be the first thing I would get, would be a chiller, if that's what I was told I needed to have.
Tina, most hobbyists are not like you. And there's a lot of, and that was a compliment, by the way. That was a compliment.
Yeah, let's
no, that was a compliment. Or me. I should have said most hobbyists are not like you and I. And most hobbyists don't take that time to do the research, find out what they need, and etc. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dan, but that's my personal opinion as a hobbyist. I see it all around me, and I'm not perfect, and I make so many mistakes. But, we're all trying to work in this together and learn and get better and do better things, and a lot of people just don't care. And so
so I mean, if they're if they're going to have axolotls and they say they have to have a certain temperature for, what is it, probably are they really small, or are they just a specific breed of seahorse that need to have a chiller?
Just a specific breed.
Yes,
Okay.
and you know what? If we could,
I'll stay away from that one then, because I'm new.
No. It was actually a really good question, and I was going to say, if there was any way we can convince the stores and the wholesalers and the people selling the seahorses to advise this to customers, like if we could bring in the
and
pot
to stock them as well. They would need to stock the chillers as well.
Yeah.
The American hobbyist is a cheap SOB. There was a cold
Dan,
water
we're live.
species.
We're live.
Well, there was a company based on the West Coast that specialized in cold water species of fish, and that's all they sold. They collected cold water species. They brought in cold water species, and I'm not talking about just seahorses. I mean fish in general. And they eventually went under. They could not support themselves in the U.S. market. And
Wow.
for whatever reason, in the United States, people are just really, really, really cheap when it comes to the hobby and what they're willing. They'll spend a fortune on some things, but other things they
Right.
won't. They just won't even begin to spend a dime on it.
Yeah, it seems to be this trend that the DIY hobbyist, right? We've made such advancements that you can do little things and get great success in a reef tank, but there's still so many species of things like cowries, seahorses, certain fish that you can't keep above a certain temperature. They're cold water only. And people don't understand that you can't do it any other way, right? And they're like, well, I'm going to try it anyway. So you get that mass killing of a certain species, and then people stop bringing it in and carrying it because the simple fact is people think there should be this, for lack of a better term, guarantee on your return. And it's like, well, we don't know what you're doing at home. You know what I mean? Like when I get people that come in and they're asking questions like, what do you have? And we will ask that question 10, 20 times to make sure we know what they have, because they'll always like, oh, and I have this. Oh, and we need to know to answer a question for you in the first place, right? To get an educated answer, we need to be educated by you as to what you have. And the thing I have noticed is the ones that are really, really dedicated to the hobby spend the money that needs to be done. But even we will go for the better deal. Like I'm the first one to admit, on my 20-gallon tank, my skimmer, I paid $80. I could have went $300 and got a skimmer that's roughly a little bigger, but that skimmer will do. I just made sure I looked around, is this thing going to work, before I bought it, and was ready to drop the money for the more expensive skimmer if that were the case. Wow, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sick.
No, you're not. No, you're fine.
No, you're right on. You're right on.
You know what I mean? But that's just it. It's you have to educate yourself on what you're getting first, whether that is equipment or it's the livestock, and especially the livestock. Like I've got the worst blue hippo tang in my tank. That bastard's after my blood shrimp now too. So he just likes murdering shrimp. I've completely and utterly figured that out. Like Benoit Balls will be doing a video just on that blue murder hippo tang, as I called him in the last video, right? I got to get him out of there, and that shrimp's not making it easy. Every time I try to catch him, he's really good at hiding. And I'm thinking, well, if you're so good at hiding, idiot, why are you getting eaten up by this, hippo tang, you numbnuts? But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, okay, you are as bad at rambling as I am. Look, Chris, I got Chris's attention. I'm just kidding.
Sam, I'm going to help Sam out here. Sam, do you have a computer? If you have a computer, get on the computer, download Chrome, and you'll get in. Your iPhones are what's causing you, and your iPad are what's causing you your problem.
You can get on with iPhone and iPad, but you won't be seen. You'd only be heard. I'm sorry, Sam. I should have mentioned you need Chrome. That might have been Chris's problem too. Were you trying with Safari?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, you got to download Chrome for your iPhone. There he is.
I do not like advising on this Hangouts thing because I'm not very. I forgot the Chrome thing. I'm sorry.
And Jimmy's got her anyway. There we go. So I'll shut up now, because unless
fine.
they're speaking to things.
No, don't shut up. Now we're whining and chatting. Whining.
Whatever.
Quick question for Chris. Down under, are you seeing hobbyists that readily get chillers for their hobby?
Yeah, so I'll sort of kind of echo what you guys said before. Anyone in the aquarium hobby loves to cut corners and cut costs where they can. And so that's something that I readily find here. Someone comes to us, they say, hey, I want to keep seahorses. And one of the very first things that I say is, where do you live? Because I try and get a feel for their climate. And then I readily advise from there. So even with the pot bellies, we sell the most of them. But I'll only advise people to actually keep them probably if they live in Victoria or South Australia, maybe, possibly, if they're not up in Adelaide, or Tasmania. if they live up in, say, Queensland or somewhere that's really, really warm, I'll probably just recommend it's either subtropical or tropical, just because it's very readily, easily available, and I feel like they'll have more success with that. So I want people to have success when they actually get a seahorse from us.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I feel like, us giving them a temperate species means well, they might just go, oh, I can't keep seahorses, and so, I give up. But that's not what I want. I want people to actually succeed and thrive with their aquariums. And so I try and just sort of nip it in the bud there and actually advise them based on where they live. But for your average hobbyist, like a decent heater here is worth like, maybe $80 to $100, whereas a decent chiller for the exact same size tank is around about $1,000. And so when you give them that comparison up front, they're just like, I'm going to go with the $100 heater.
Right.
So, from there I just go, well, then go try.
Okay, real quick question. For hobbyists, no matter where they live, well, actually, it does depend where they live. But what would you say are the most important pieces of equipment for a regular species, if it's not a potbelly? Are there certain things that you advise all people that buy from you? How do you tell them? What do you tell them they need in their tank?
So, things that we would advise is, go your skimmer. Make sure you've got adequate filtration, obviously. So whether that's in the form of live rock or just skimmer and water changes and that, but we try and get people as best prepared as they can be for seahorse keeping up front. And so one of the things that we try and promote as well is even just the basics, like making sure your tank is fully cycled and ready to go. So unfortunately, it's not one of those things you can necessarily rush. And so quite often we're actually sort of waiting on our customers a little bit. We have the seahorses ready to go and we could have shipped them weeks ago, but we're waiting for the hobbyist to be ready for them. And that's something we try and promote as well.
I think that's awesome. So you will actually hold them for an order. So wow, that's really cool. That's very impressive. I'm trying to think of anything else, and I'm checking notes. If anybody else has anything, feel free or chat. Nobody's
I
talking.
have one.
Go ahead.
If Dan knows all the trouble I've been having with my seahorses lately, is there anything that I can do with the tank to try and stop it from happening, since it's happened to me twice now?
Hey, Briley, if you would, can you tell us really quickly what's happening?
So I'm having trouble with parasites again, and that's 2 new tank setups for them. I've now only got 1 cooter girl left, and I've lost my 3 boys. The last girl seems to be going okay, but she's in quarantine, getting medicated still, and I'm just really hesitant on putting her back in the main display.
Thoughts, guys? Or questions for her?
Chris, are you familiar with what she's dealing with?
Yeah, so I've had a chat with Riley behind the scenes, and
Okay.
I've kind of offered as much advice as I can reasonably.
I sort of
Yeah, it's
feel
just
like,
one of those difficult things.
yeah,
Right.
I feel like I'm doing everything right, but somewhere it's going wrong. I think, though, one of the things that have probably caused the parasites to happen this time was back when the tank was still new. It's only about 6 months now. Back when it was new, I was having bad cyano outbreaks, and I had tried sand in there, which I've never done before. And I'd siphon off the top layer and try and clean it out and do, more regular water changes, and I just wasn't beating it. So I ended up completely emptying the tank, pulled out the sand, and replaced with a tiny layer of crushed coral, which is what I'm used to. so that way I can siphon it out and clean it. And since then, I haven't had any more cyano or any more issues. The tank's actually going really good, but it's just now that the parasites have hit them, and I suppose they probably populated from the cyano outbreak. That's all I can think of.
The only thing that we haven't talked about that in our conversations
Yep.
that I might suggest as I sit here and think is possibly the use of probiotics.
Yep.
Trying to go in and clean up the excess organics and compete against the bad guys, if you will. Chris, I don't know if you guys use probiotics there at work. We use them.
No, so we try and go against, like, we try and remedy problems mostly just with things like water changes and trying to keep the water at its optimal sort of pristine cleanliness.
Right.
We have the option to treat things with medications, with antibiotics and that, but honestly, I don't think we've even used antibiotics in the time that I've been there. We try and resolve things in different ways, just because I guess we're almost a little bit paranoid of bacterial resistances and things like that with medications.
No, that makes sense. The probiotics, though, I use not really to treat seahorses as much as it is a preventative type thing, and it also helps speed up the growth. It helps better with digestion and a multitude of other things. It's in the aquaculture world, probiotics are becoming a bigger and bigger thing, and improving survival rates and improving production rates, growth rates, etc. In the hobbyist world, it's difficult to find a good probiotic, but there are some out there that, like the Sanalife, which is available down under. I gave somebody the link the other day where to find it, but was it you?
Yep.
Yep. So I've seen it make a difference for us in our production.
Okay.
I like the probiotics too, but I've seen different opinions, pro and con, and different opinions. No, there are lots of ways to do things. We all know that.
Yep.
But I do kind of, one of the things that I wanted to accomplish with this, and Chris, you're at this point off the hook. You've done the interview, so now we're just chatting and whining. But yeah, one of the things that I originally wanted to do with this, in addition to interviews, was allow someone to come on and ask these kind of questions. So Briley, I know you probably didn't get the answers that you wanted to get. I think a lot of times questions, which you've talked to both of these gentlemen on the side and me, and I understand your frustration. Oh my gosh, I understand your frustration. I can't even imagine going through something twice and going through everything that you went through to try to fix it and then having problems again is just crazy. But
Well, that's like me, Kelly.
Yeah.
I went through it 3 times, and now all I ever get are messages on Facebook on how to deal with ick, and usually a lot of pushback about the methods for dealing with ick. And it's like, look, it's kind of easy here, guys. There's one, do it this way or do it this way.
Hey, Craig.
You don't have a lot of choices, so go ahead.
Side note, just to let you know, I'm bringing on the expert. When I can say it now. He's probably going to kill me. He's going to kill me for announcing it this soon. But when I go to MACNA, Paul is coming on Wine Wednesday with me. And if you don't know who Paul is, you should. They call him the research, and he knows what he's talking about. And he's going to set the record straight about ick.
Excellent.
Which isn't ick. It's actually something else. But anyways, back to the point. Briley, there's nothing wrong with you. I'm glad that you came on here with your problem. I'm sorry that we don't have specific answers for you, but, that's what I'm hoping that people can do is come in here and chat. And the other thing is, just to let you know, when I end the video in a moment, you'll still be in a video conversation. So, if people have to go, they can. But once I end the video live, then if anybody needed to say anything off the record, that's possible. Of course, these people are all trying to help each other, so there's opportunities. I just want to bring people together from all across the world to work on getting better with seahorses. So, did anybody else have anything else? Wow, that didn't make any sense. Did anyone else have any questions for Chris or anyone else in the conversation before I go ahead and cut this, because I don't want it to be 500 hours long? I'm going to say that's no. Did you have something? I heard a voice. Okay. All right. Well, then thank you if you tuned in, or if you're watching later. Next week, we'll have a new guest on, and you can always ask questions afterwards, and I will get them to the previous guests. We're going to be starting some new things, so stay tuned. Keep coming. Thank you so much, Chris, from Seahorse World, for coming on and talking about Seahorse World with us and seahorses. Excellent interview, excellent information. Everybody have a fantastic night. Sorry. Everybody have a fantastic night. And got to do my little thing here. All right. Cheers.